Few people have ever heard of it, but Mauthausen was not just another Nazi camp. It was known as the place where death had many forms, all of them slow, cruel, and profitable. In 1938, when Nazi Germany invaded and annexed Austria, it seemed like just another dark chapter in history. But behind the waving flags and fiery speeches, something far more sinister was beginning to take shape. The Nazi regime didn't just want to silence Jews, political opponents, or anyone seen as a threat. They wanted to grow rich from human suffering. And in the depths of Mauthausen, they discovered an almost endless mine, not just of granite, but of flesh, bones, and slave labor. What makes this place one of the most brutal and least known camps of the Third Reich? And why do so many historians say it was designed to be a death machine that generated profit? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover about Mauthausen might forever change the way you see the horrors of Nazism. In August 1938, the first prisoners arrived at the site where Mauthausen would be built. They came directly from Dachau, another camp already notorious for its terror. But what awaited them here would be even worse. And here lies something that speaks volumes about the Nazi mindset. The prisoners would not merely be confined in Mauthausen. They themselves would have to build the camp where they would be tortured. It was these men, starving and driven by blows from rifle butts and guards' screams, who erected the barbed wire fences, dug the ditches, raised the watchtowers, and constructed the barracks where they would sleep, crammed together like animals. Can you imagine what it means to be forced to build your own prison, with every stone laid, knowing it was part of the trap that might one day kill you? And it wasn't just any camp that was born there. Mauthausen was classified as a Category 3 camp. In the hierarchy of Nazi terror, that meant the worst of the worst. Category 3 was reserved for those whom the regime deemed irredeemable political enemies, people marked for death. So much so that Mauthausen was known even among the Nazis themselves as the camp of no return. Anyone who entered there, in the regime's view, no longer had any value as a human being. The only thing left was to work until their body broke, or die. And the construction of the camp was only the beginning, because the true horror was about to begin. Mauthausen grew, like a cancer spreading silently. Gradually, what began as a single, isolated camp transformed into a vast network, with over 49 subcamps spread across Austria and southern Germany. As unimaginable as all this may sound, the numbers speak for themselves. In 1945, Mauthausen and its subcamps held more than 190,000 prisoners, men, women, and even children. In this context, prisoners arrived crammed into cattle cars, days on end with almost no water, no air, no room even to move. Many arrived exhausted, sick, or unconscious. Some arrived dead, but for the Nazis that wasn't enough. As soon as they disembarked, a cold and calculated process of dehumanization began. Their clothes and few belongings were stripped away, jewelry, wedding rings, even sentimental items. Everything was confiscated. Soldiers shaved the heads of men, women, and even children, leaving only bare scalps, in an act designed to destroy every trace of identity. No one there had a name anymore, only a number, recorded in lists and files. Instead of clothes, they received striped uniforms or scraps of filthy fabric, often not even fitting properly. And then came the barracks, where at most 300 people should have fit. As many as 2,000 were crammed in. There weren't enough beds. Many slept sitting up. Others lay side by side, so close together it was impossible even to turn over. Imagine the smell, the heat of feverish bodies, the strong odor of sweat, feces, urine, pus, death. The latrines were constantly overflowing. Disease spread like wildfire. The cold was biting, especially in the Austrian winter, when the wind cut through the wooden walls of the barracks. And all of this under the constant watch of armed guards, ready to beat, humiliate, or kill at the slightest sign of weakness. No one there was seen as human, and that was precisely the intention. The prisoners' bodies were destroyed day after day, in a strategy deliberately designed to kill slowly. Hunger was a fundamental part of this plan. By 1945, the daily diet of a prisoner in Mauthausen didn't even reach 600 calories. That's less than half the minimum needed for a person simply to stay alive, let alone work. Meals were miserable. A hot liquid they called soup, which often was nothing more than cloudy water. Sometimes there was hard bread, and it was not uncommon for this bread to be mixed with sawdust to make it stretch further. Hunger became so extreme that prisoners tried to eat the leather from their shoes, grass from the ground, or even scraps of garbage. And there was another layer of cruelty: the capos. These were prisoners promoted to the role of supervisors. They received minimal privileges, slightly more food, better beds, less hard labor, in exchange for brutality against the other prisoners. They had the power to decide who would get a little more food, who would be punished, who would live or die. It was a perfect way to divide the prisoners themselves and keep everyone under total control. But not all the suffering happened inside the barracks. For many, the worst was outside. Mauthausen also functioned as a forced labor camp for armament production, road construction, railways. But nothing was more feared than the granite quarries. Their work was practically a death sentence. Imagine enormous blocks of stone, weighing up to 50 kilograms, carried on the shoulders of men reduced to skin and bones. And to get out of the quarry, there was only one path: the infamous stairs of death. It consisted of 186 steps, steep, uneven, irregular, slippery with stone dust and sand. Prisoners had to climb them carrying granite blocks in their arms, sometimes more than once a day. All it took was one stumble, one man falling, and the weight of the stone, plus the bodies of those behind, would tumble down the slope. It became a domino effect. Dozens could be crushed to death right there, and if someone didn't fall on their own, the guards might help. It was common for Nazi soldiers to pick a prisoner, laugh in his face, and order him to jump off a nearby cliff. They called that place the parachutist's wall, a cliff nearly 50 meters high. If the victim hesitated, the guards simply pushed him off, or forced other prisoners to do it, sometimes just for fun. But the brutality of Mauthausen didn't stop at forced labor or inhumane conditions. The camp also became a site of systematic executions and torture, revealing the coldest and most sadistic side of the Nazi regime. There was indeed a gas chamber there. It wasn't as massive as those in Auschwitz. In Mauthausen, it was smaller, but it served a clear purpose: to eliminate prisoners considered incapable of continuing to work. Many were taken there under the pretext of taking a shower. They were ordered to undress, enter the chamber, and then the doors were locked. The gas would fill the space within minutes. Thousands died this way. For those not selected for the gas chamber, there were other fates. Many prisoners were simply shot. Others were beaten to death with clubs or killed by slow hangings. And when I say slow, I mean truly slow. They used iron beams. They tied the rope around the prisoner's neck, but didn't drop him from a height sufficient to break his neck. The condemned man was left hanging, strangling slowly, sometimes for several minutes, while he struggled and suffocated in front of the others. In winter, there was yet another form of punishment: drowning in freezing water. Soldiers would throw prisoners into tanks or pits filled with icy water, just to see who would survive. Sometimes this was used as punishment for the slightest infractions: speaking without permission, stumbling while carrying stones, or simply looking at a guard the wrong way. But perhaps nothing sums up the horror of Mauthausen as much as the so-called medical experiments. There, Nazi doctors conducted tests with deadly diseases, injected unknown substances into prisoners, removed organs without anesthesia, and even sewed body parts together in completely insane experiments. The goal? Anything from studying human endurance to trying to perfect methods of killing. There were no limits. None. Mauthausen came to be seen by many historians as the ultimate symbol of Nazi cruelty, not only because it killed tens of thousands of people, but because it was designed from the beginning to crush human dignity, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But even amid so much death, there were survivors, people who carried this living memory for the rest of their lives, to tell the world what should never happen again. In May 1945, the war in Europe was coming to an end. The Nazi army was collapsing, and in the camp, the elite guards of the Nazi regime began a frantic race to erase evidence. They burned documents in a hurry, tried to destroy records, and many guards simply changed clothes and tried to blend in with the local population, pretending they had never been there, but they couldn't hide everything. On May 5th, tanks of the American 11th Armored Division arrived at the gates of Mauthausen. There was virtually no Nazi resistance. The war was already lost. Imagine the scene. Prisoners weak, skeletal, but still finding strength to try to stand and run toward the gates. Some raised improvised flags to greet the Allies. Cries of freedom echoed where, just days before, there had been only silence and death. But the truth is that many prisoners wanted not only freedom, they wanted revenge. Some of the elite guards who hadn't managed to escape were captured by the prisoners themselves. And there were instances where they were killed on the spot, beaten to death by men who had lost everything: their families, health, dignity. And who could judge them for that? But while immediate justice happened right there, another kind of justice would come later in the courts. Because even in the midst of that horror, there were those who thought of preserving the truth. A group of Spanish prisoners, risking their own lives, hid improvised cameras and managed to secretly take photos inside the camp. These images later became crucial evidence in the post-war trials. It was the photographs that showed the world the true extent of what had happened at Mauthausen. Men reduced to living skeletons, piles of bodies, steps soaked in blood, overcrowded barracks. These images, cruel but necessary, ensured that this memory would remain a living warning. It's almost impossible to imagine how far human cruelty can go, but at Mauthausen we came terrifyingly close to finding out the answer. And I ask you, how could something like this be possible? If the story impacted you, leave your comment and be sure to like this video, because stories like this must not be forgotten. If you want to know more about scaphism, the most disturbing punishment you've probably never heard of, click here on the screen and check it out now.